First, my name is Josh Ellsworth from STAHLS. I've been in the world of apparel decorating my entire life, and in some role at STAHLS for the past 20 years doing sales, training, education, working in production, just working in the business. I'm excited to share some more business concepts with you when we look at our heat press and how we are going to maximize our investment. Because what I find for most apparel decorators is, yes, we need the knowledge on how to make the stuff, but we also need a knowledge on how to sell and how to market everything that we can make. So that's the spirit of this. Has anybody ever went to a lemonade stand? Has anybody's kid or niece or nephew ever run a lemonade stand? My wife and I set up to have a community yard sale in our neighborhood. We spent weeks pulling the stuff out of the garage, the attic, putting everything out, meticulously placing it, thinking about how we would price it. Everybody wants a bargain and a discount when they come to those type of sales, so we have all of our products out. My daughter at the time, 10 years old, decides she wants to run a little lemonade stand alongside the yard sale. As you might expect, you know how the story ends. The lemonade stand always makes more money than the yard sale, right? And I think there's a couple good reasons why, and we're going to explore those today. It's kind of a fun way to approach it. And so as we go through today, I'm going to ask you to just be open, use your creativity. I'm going to compare your apparel decoration business to a lemonade stand and try to give you some tips on how you can achieve results like my daughter. But first, let's learn our recipes, right? When we look at a nice cool glass of lemonade, we know lemon plus water plus sugar, right? Ever go to Chick-fil-A? We see that on the sign. Lemon, water, sugar. Those are the ingredients to make a good lemonade. What are the ingredients to make a good t-shirt? Pretty simple. With a heat press, it's t-shirt plus transfer. Making the thing and how you make it and the ingredients that go into making it is extremely important to having a good outcome. We talked yesterday, and we've been talking throughout these classes about how you need to invest in quality equipment for your business so you can produce results that'll keep people coming back time and time again. That all centralizes on picking the right apparel, picking the right transfer, and making sure you have an accurate heat press to complete the job. One of my favorite things is if you have the proper ingredients and you're set up for business is simplicity. How much does a lemonade cost in the picture here? 10 cents. I think that's why we have success. We take it for granted. I'm not worried if it's 10 cents or $10. It's not about what the price is, but it is about that there is a price. And you've prepared in advance to be able to deliver that price quickly, and so it's clear to everybody. You know what that does? Of course they know the price, but it starts to take out the price pressure in the negotiation. When you deliver a price in your business, if you're waffling over, let me think about it and get back to you, all of a sudden we open ourselves up for, they're just kind of coming up with the price. So as a consumer, as a buyer, that seems like it's open for negotiation. So whether you are meeting with a client at the local Panera Bread and going over a custom t-shirt job, or whether you're setting up at an event and you are printing on site, which is a really big growth area for heat printing for experiences, having that price out front and knowing exactly what your price is going to fuel your business to profitable results. So what's on today's menu? We're going to talk about calculating cost. Before we can even set a selling price, we need to know how much the t-shirt and the transfer and how we connect those and they go together to make a good product that we can sell. So we're going to talk about what goes into calculating cost, because I have a feeling that there are some parts of the cost equation that some folks in the room are leaving out. I find it time and time again that there are some parts of this equation that we're leaving out, or maybe we just don't understand how to calculate our costs at all. So I'm going to go deep and give you a formula on how to show you exactly how to calculate what it costs to make a high quality shirt. Once we have a good cost, we have a good foundation, we can start to think about setting prices. We'll talk about tips for setting prices. I like to be informed by the market. How much will my potential buyer pay? I like to come up with what that is before I even know the cost. I obviously wouldn't go out and sell it like that, but it just gives you an idea on how to approach pricing, as we want to maximize what the buyer is willing to pay for the product. Some people say what the market will bear. So think about that as you're understanding your customer and knowing your business. Then we're going to talk about communicating prices. Once we understand our costs, we've set a price, how do we tell a customer about that price? Strategy of selection. I think one of the beautiful things about a lemonade stand is it's painfully simple to go up to it and order a lemonade. It's not tough to get a decision. So we're going to talk about the strategy of selection, the strategy of extras to really maximize how much we're selling, simplicity versus complexity, and last but not least, we'll give you some bonus tips on why we buy, why people buy, so we can drive buyer behavior. Sound like a good class that you want to go through? All right, we're going to work through it today and we're going to have some fun. So we measure success by profit. How much does it really cost to make that lemonade? How much does it really cost to make that t-shirt? And if we don't understand what it costs, we can't understand profitability. So these are some of the things that cost. Number one, most people get, which is why I put it number one. Everybody knows, right? There's a cost for that t-shirt. There's a cost for that transfer. That's usually pretty easy to calculate. Now, in the case of you're creating your own heat transfer vinyl design or something like that, you may need to go a little further with a cost calculator to figure out what it costs. But if you're buying a transfer, you know that transfer cost me $2, my t-shirt cost me $3. Boom, I have $5 in cost. But where we start to miss out is time costs, right? What does it cost to complete the work? We all realize that we want to get paid for the work we do, right? We'd like to get paid more for the work that we do. And so it's important to start valuing your time and talking specifically about how much are you paying yourself or your employee to do that job. That goes into the cost equation. And then last but not least is space costs. Think about where you're doing business, and there's a real strategy to that. If you're a lean business that's operating out of a bedroom, there's still a cost for the space. It may not be as much overhead as somebody in a brick and mortar or a retail location or a mall kiosk, but there is definitely space that needs to be accounted for in your cost equation, as well as electricity and everything that goes into that. So that space to do business, to print product, there's a cost to that. And I'm going to tell you that cost should apply to every single job. How do you do that? Well, we're going to teach you. It's actually pretty simple. So this is the equation to get total cost of a product. Direct labor. Let's first define the word direct. Direct is what goes into the labor of actually making the thing, right? So whether it's a cup of lemonade and you're mixing those ingredients together, or whether it's a transfer and you're the one that's cutting, weeding, and heat applying, or just heat applying to your shirt, your direct labor is your manufacturing labor. It goes into creating the product. It's not what goes into selling the product or marketing the product. Those are indirect expenses that we're going to talk about that'll fall under overhead. Your direct labor is the time it takes to actually make the product. When we look at direct labor, and I will get to the other parts of the equation, but let's understand this one first, I like to break it down to minutes to complete, like the smallest possible number that I can get to apply a labor rate to. So you probably know what you're paying somebody if you have an employee per hour. Make sure you have the insurance, the benefits, the total cost to pay that employee for an hour. You'll understand what that is. If you're that employee, pay yourself for that job. Establish a rate for the heat press work that you do, or whatever the task is that you're creating. Let's just say, for simple math, that rate is $15 per hour. Now, I'm going to take the minutes in an hour and get just a cost per minute. And so in the case of heat press labor, to create this t-shirt, I have 25 cents in labor per minute, okay? Now you get to start to ask yourself the question, right? How long does it take to make that shirt? How long does it take you guys to print a shirt on a heat press? What do you think? You gotta load the shirt, right? You gotta place your design. About 2 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that. Depends on the complexity of the placement and how good you are. That's why we look at efficiency. Right? Once we understand our labor costs and it's in our cost equation, then I can start to justify an investment based on return by reducing labor and how long it takes to print a shirt. Right? So make sure you know that number. How long does it take you to print a shirt? I don't think you need to be so specific on every single shirt. Find a good average for the jobs that you do. Time yourself completing several jobs and establish that how long it takes to press a shirt with the products that you're using and your skill level at the heat press. This one's pretty simple. You multiply the minutes, in this case 2 minutes to complete a shirt, times the labor rate per minute, and we get our labor cost. That is a piece of direct cost that goes into the equation. Everybody got that down? Next, we move into materials. Again, this is pretty simple, but there's some hidden factors here that often people miss, so I want to make sure I go through this as well. When we look at the materials to complete a job, you see the first word on the right-hand section is landed cost, right? Often, and especially with freight prices increasing across the country, we leave out freight in our equation. And so we wonder why there's not as much money in the bank as we thought we sold or made. Well, sometimes that gets gobbled up by freight. It's another one of those hidden areas. So I like to do an average of how much it costs to land a transfer or a garment to my business. A lot of companies will have flat rate shipping. You can look at your order history from your blank apparel supplier and take the average of the shipping across the number of pieces you purchased. Again, I'm not trying to make your life so complex where you have to do this on every job. You should be able to establish some fundamental averages for your business and just kind of refresh those every quarter to make sure you're covered. It's a lot better than what a lot of decorators are doing today. And so the garment with freight, the heat transfer with freight, and I've given you a little sample for our equation that we're working out here, because these specific samples are going to be important when we talk about how to apply indirect costs to each and every job. And so in this case, we have $25 at $4 each for shirt. I used to have $2 in there, and everybody said, where are you going to shirt for $2? So I changed it to $4. It's just the point of having a price there. $15 freight to get it to me just to show the landed cost, and then my transfer at a few bucks plus the $15 in freight. And you see how it adds, 60 cents on each particular thing, $1.20 to the total cost equation to think about freight. So, cost of that shirt and the transfer is $8.35. Okay? We need to add those direct costs together. What does that look like? Our direct labor is 2 minutes for the shirt, right? 50 cents. And our materials that go into manufacturing the shirt was $8.35. Okay? So I have 2 of the 3 parts of the equation mastered. I think a lot of you can do that. A lot of you aren't paying yourself for the work, so I would encourage you to start establishing that rate today, because if you hope to replace yourself, you have to pay yourself, because nobody works for free. Okay? And the next part is really a big one, and that's overhead. You may call this indirect cost, right? The direct labor and the materials are your direct costs to making the product, and then everything else goes into overhead, which is going to be a whole list of things. Like, this is not a comprehensive list. You guys can probably name 5 more things off the top of your head, but this is everything that doesn't go into directly manufacturing. So sometimes that's accounting and legal expenses. I would recommend you get yourself an accountant and set up your business legally, as we spoke with a lot of you yesterday, to make sure you're getting the best wholesale prices out there in the market and doing things legitimately. Also administrative salaries. So that's any of your front office stuff, whether it's sales, marketing, finance. If you're a bigger business, human resources, all those departments will be front of house expenses. Depreciation. So when you think about an equipment investment in your business, depreciating that over a set number of years, again, consult with your accountant on how to do this to maximize the tax benefit for your business. But there's certainly a lot of money out there for you to think about in your business that you can get back depending on how you're structured. But all of this flows into overhead, including rent. If your building is free, we're moving in. Sound good? Right? No, your building's not free. You're going to charge rent. So think about your space, and that falls into your overhead equation. So this is really interesting to me, because we all say that, I've heard it said, I shouldn't say we all say, I've heard it said that crafters are ruining the business, right? They're taking my customers, and it's a legitimate challenge. But some of you are that crafter or that hobbyist that started with a Cricut or Silhouette, and you're growing into a legitimate business. And so I think it's a mindset thing. Is usually somebody coming from that space has very low overhead, right? Maybe they don't value their time, and we're trying to educate and teach people to pay themselves so they do value their time. But usually if you're operating out of a spare bedroom, you have very little overhead. And as a business, that overhead should be working for you. So where you're lean, we like to call that, without a lot of overhead, you should have less cost in your equation. It costs you less to produce a product. Where we're burdened by overhead, meaning we have a lot of administrative salaries because we're paying salespeople, and we have a lot of marketing expense, and we have a big, beautiful building, right, that we're paying rent on. We have all of those things, and that has to go into the equation. So you have a lot more to cover. Those things aren't bad at all. They're only bad if they're not working for you. So be very careful about your overhead expense and make sure that anything you're paying for that falls into the bucket of overhead is helping you establish value for the customer. If that's person-to-person communication with the sales rep because you want to pay an administrative salary, that should be bringing value to the customer and helping you to create unique value and compete better than somebody who wouldn't have that. So that's my tip here. These overhead expenses, as you see here, they really add up as we're going through it here. So let me show you kind of what this looks like. A little more complex equation, but I think it can be easy for you. We're looking to get to an overhead rate. What that means is I want a percentage for my business to know my overhead is 10%, my overhead is 20% or 30% or 17%. There's a specific number that we can get to for your business that you can apply to every job to calculate your cost. And so to calculate that overhead rate, the first thing we need to do is pick an optimal moment in time, a typical moment in time, I should say. So let's say we've been running business, and this is kind of our level of business, and we can look back a year. That's beautiful if you can look back over a whole year and add up all of those indirect expenses to get to a total and compare that to your direct expenses, okay? If you can't get to a year, most people struggle with that. You're like, how am I going to do that? Think about calculating it for a month or 3 months. What I'm saying is you don't want to calculate it at a peak or a valley in sales because your consumption of product will be different in your direct expenses and how much labor you're paying yourself. You want to do it over a typical period of time for the business. So what you'll do is you'll take all of those indirect expenses over X period of time, let's just say it's a month, and on the sample I got $1,500, right? This is just a sample. So everything that I'm paying for that's indirect expenses, $1,500 for advertising costs, rent, utilities, everything over that period of time. My direct expenses, which when I go back and look at the bills of how many shirts I bought, how many transfers I bought, how much labor I paid to manufacture the products I sold in that same period, I'm at $10,000. Okay, so you need those two numbers to be able to get to an overhead rate that you can apply to every job. And then basically all you do is you take your indirect expenses on the third line under sample, $1,500, divide that by your direct expenses over the same period, and I get my rate, which is 0.15, 15% overhead for this fictitious business. Now I don't want you to use 0.15, but I want you to use something in absence of nothing. So if you feel like this is too complex for you and you can't get to it right away, you should aspire to figure this out. You should consult with your accountant or somebody to be able to help you with this, but include some overhead. Otherwise, you have a lot of unknown costs. You're not going to be happy with your profit results in your business. Okay? So of course, we're trying to get the 0.15 to a percent, so 15%, and then we start to do our calculation. Okay. You ready to see how this applies to an actual job? So we have our 15% number. Any questions? It's easy to get lost in math. You guys knew we were going to do this much math for a lemonade stand, right? It's an important part, calculating costs. Now we want to take our direct costs, which was our labor and materials, and we want to multiply that by our overhead rate, and that gives us our overhead amount for that job. So you remember it was like $885 or $835 or something we had in our direct cost to make that shirt with the t-shirt, the transfer, the labor, right? We're going to take that $8 and change, and we're going to multiply it by 0.15. And that's going to give me the overhead that I'm going to apply to that sale. Think about this. If you had a $40 item that cost to make like a jacket or a high-end piece of performance wear, and you don't apply overhead to that, you're leaving potentially in this fictitious business about $6 in cost on the table that's unaccounted for on every single garment. So this can add up and become a big thing. That's why it's important to include. So our calculation is this, $885 times our 15% or 0.15 on this particular t-shirt, I'm going to calculate $1.33 in overhead. We have everything we need now to get total cost for this job. And that looks like this. We have our direct labor, we have our materials, and we have our overhead specifically for that order. So wouldn't you know, those 25 t-shirts, they cost a little more than $5 to make. It actually costs $10.18 to make that shirt. So with that firm foundation of an accurate cost, or really a much closer to accurate cost, we can approach the market. And we'll start thinking differently about selling $7 and $8 and $9 t-shirts because we make a couple bucks a shirt, right? We need to get rid of that mentality, really understand our customers, and execute some of these other concepts I'm going to teach you on setting selling prices and mimicking that lemonade stand that outproduces other apparel decorators, other customers.